Nevada. Most see its scorching heat, desert roadways, and flashing lights. That's only the surface, though. Below, the time-worn cracks and abandoned military tunnels that no one recalls excavating are covered in dust. Ruins with clocks that continue to tick, but there is no one left to wind them. And a man-made lake that continues to flow years after sinking without a trace. These are not tourist stories. They are the ones found in lost radio tapes, declassified logs, and found video that is too weird to describe. Hold your breath, put on your headphones, and turn out the lights. Because Area 51 does not contain Nevada's most unsettling secrets. They can be found where the government neglected to remove them. Due to the mysteries that remain unsolved are the most unsettling. The facility in Mercury collapses. Something different was what they were searching for. You will never see some areas of Nevada on a map. Furthermore, you wouldn't be let entry even if you did. Just to the north of within a chain-link fence with rusting barbed wire on top, Las Vegas, a path leads to a location where the government detonated more than 900 nuclear weapons in a place that Americans have never heard of. They refer to it as Mercury, or the Nevada test site engulfed the desert village that was forgotten. And there was an incident there in 1987 that has never been outlined. It was classified as a containment failure officially, a deep hole blast that caused the soil to split more than anticipated. However, the men who were present and are still refusing to approach the site will tell you something different. The explosion opened a door, not just a gap. Furthermore, the reason for it wasn't supposed to be located. A group of engineers at the Nevada test site on March 10, 1987 started a standard subterranean low-yield explosion close to Area 20. It was designed as a class trial and a series of tests to model the effects of earthquakes on reinforced tunnel systems. However, monitors increased 3 seconds after detonation, not from the explosion, but from a deeper source. Sensors positioned 300 feet below the surface started describing odd vibrations. Instead of the firm echo of shifting rock, one person compared it to a hollow tremor. Even worse, a reinforced shaft that had been constructed decades prior collapsed in a straight vertical plunge, making it one of the seismic tunnels. Initially, they thought the explosion was to blame, but after lowering a heat probe into the debris, they discovered that the bomb site was not where collapse started. It was from below. When crews arrived to retrieve the equipment, they discovered anything strange. A huge tunnel intersection that is enough big for a car with corners are rounded rather than blasted, and walls are carved smoothly. For that level, there were no documents, blueprints, or construction orders, and it was a first for the workers who had been employed at Mercury since the 1960s. The walls weren't constructed from concrete. Something else was used to make them. A composite metal alloy that is not found in the United States facilities below ground. It didn't rust. It didn't vibrate. Additionally, the report submitted that same week stated that it absorbed illumination. As soon as they stepped inside the doorway, the sound changed, according to one crew member who entered the passageway. No echo, silence, and no ambient feedback. The website was taken down the following day. They reassigned 2 men. A fresh non-disclosure agreement was required of the others, but the true enigma didn't start and continue for 2 months. In May 1987, a geophysicist working under contract an irregularity was discovered during maintenance on the seismic monitoring apparatus. Low-frequency pulses that are repeated and captured once every 18 minutes. Not from above or adjacent tectonic movements, but from 60 meters beneath the site of the initial explosion. Furthermore, the pattern wasn't arbitrary. It had a mechanical sound. After 4 weeks, the pulses abruptly changed tone. There was a little difference in frequency. It was like the sound of metal scraping on stone when converted to audio playback. The one word was scrawled by the project director at the time, a man who had approval for several defense projects. Invading his private notes. The site was never able to locate the source because interred. The passageway was reinforced with 4 composite foam pieces, backfilled, and sealed in October of that year. Steel mesh layers, yet it was unsuccessful. 1993 saw a small earthquake close to the same area sent off a series of sensor warnings, not because of seismic activity, but release of pressure. According to documents retrieved via FOIA requests, One internal communication stated, "Avoid further excavation." According to acoustic data, displacement is still occurring. Another seismic at 190 meters. Indicators point to a hollow. The depth is unknown, but that's whether the paper trail comes to an end. According to some engineers, it wasn't a collapse at all because of this. Containment was the strategy. Additionally, what they didn't build the structure that contains it. A 70-year-old former facility worker consented to an anonymous interview for an oral history project about the Cold War. In 1987, when questioned about Mercury, he stopped for over 20 seconds before stating, "We were digging for simulations, but someone else had already been digging." He never explained the meaning of that. However, he added, when asked, "There were doors down there, just not ours." The desert attempted to obliterate more than just Mercury. Only a few hours distant, beneath Lake Mead's gradual retreat, another ghost arose. Not an animal, not a sound, but a whole town that would never be discovered again. St. Thomas, a town that was never to be found again, was evacuated in silence. Nevada, beneath Lake Mead. The desert never forgets. It simply buries. However, the past might sometimes return to intact. How would you respond if you discovered a whole town submerged? Not stones or ruins, but structures, doors, and walls that have been marked by a recent visitor. Welcome to Nevada's St. Thomas, a town that purposefully drowned, government erased, and never intended to reappear till the flood receded. Furthermore, what emerged wasn't merely brick and ancient wood, yet proof that someone was always there. Early in the 1930s, the Hoover Dam project was being completed by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. They had to flood a big area in order to accomplish it. Of the muddy river valley to build America's biggest reservoir, Lake Mead. That meant demolishing the town of St. Thomas as well as everything else in its way. Established by Mormon settlers in 1865, at one point, Thomas had a school, general shop, hotel, and more than 500 residents. A tiny railroad spur, even. However, none of that was important. In 1938, water from the town had received the recently finished dam. Residents were told to leave. All of it was torched, or they said it was bulldozed. Hugh Lord, the last resident, is renowned for having paddled when the water reached his porch. He was in a boat, away from his house. Additionally, St. Thomas vanished for decades until water began to fall. Lake Mead fell to unusually low levels in 2002 as a result of record drought and rising water demand. Minimal levels. The remnants of St. Thomas rose from the silt and quiet for the first time in more than 60 years. However, even archaeologists were stunned by what they discovered. The buildings remained intact. Some beams were still intact. Walls, even signs with engravings. It wasn't the worst part, though. A few structures displayed evidence of recent occupancy. New sculptures, ancient, undamaged food cans, rope markings where none had previously been tied, and deep ones that led into and out of the schoolhouse that was once in the town. There were no boat markings, no paths that led there. There's only one path through the mud. It indicates that the person who left the prints came from below. A team of UNLV environmental historians started recording the rediscovered remains. They aimed to document any artifacts and erosion trends. However, one team member asserted that something was amiss. Within the remains of the church, they discovered markings, not graffiti, carved in the foundation made of stone that has not been seen since 1938. While some had similarities to early Mormon iconography, others did not correspond to anything recorded in the area. They resembled crop circle patterns engraved in overlapping geometric shapes. Centered designs. Stranger still, soil samples taken close to those symbols showed no watery residue, as though those walls had never been submerged. A crew from the Discovery Channel documenting a drought the St. Thomas site was explored in a 2006 documentary. 3 drones were carried by them, and 2 time-lapse cameras for night vision. 1 drone returned, but the other 2 abruptly disconnected. Even if there was no signal interference and the weather was clear, what bothered them wasn't the defeat. What did come back was a video that was taken from a drone. The last scene displayed in scan of the Southern Edge ruins in infrared. Additionally, at 3:12 a.m., a figure shows up. Humanoid, upright, but a little crooked. It wasn't moving. It was standing motionless in the dirt already. However, the figure did not reflect heat when the camera zoomed in. It was captivating. The feed then stopped. The video was never shown. St. Thomas was not present when the show aired. Tribal Mojave, the town, has been the subject of stories for ages. Oral legend states that the location of St. Thomas was formerly regarded as a forbidden passageway, not for its ghost but for the place they dubbed the land that murmurs. One senior characterized it as a valley that, when left unattended, speaks back. More recently, another informed a visiting reporter, it was never meant to be dry. Something in the ground belongs to the water, and that area is covered for a purpose. A sonar scan of Lake Mead in 2014 showed something surprising. A closed hallway partially filled with sediment beneath the site of the former town. Analysis revealed that the pattern did not correspond to a natural cave. Structures. It had a tunnel, 90 degrees angles, and one that isn't found in government records of floodplains. This is where the twist lies. The dam is not indicated by the corridor. It stretches out from it, straight into the desert. However, what would happen if St. Thomas was meant to remain buried and the ground itself burned to divulge its secret? In the desolate heat of the Black Rock Desert, just a few hours northwest, residents have discovered how to steer clear of specific soil areas. Because of the Earth's pulses, not because of radiation or erosion, considerable heat, and there was never any fire started. Under Gerlach, the flames, the earth that burnt without a flame. Nevada's Black Rock Desert is close to Gerlach. Ashes left behind by some fires, but nothing else. No smoke, no burnt wood, no justification. Only a heat that radiates up from the earth. Keep quiet, both living and invisible. Greetings from Gerlach, Nevada, a community that is adjacent to one of the America's most isolated deserts. Today, most people know it as the location of Burning Man. However, a long time before the celebration, something else was whispered in this place before the music and the art. Something to be avoided rather than celebrated. Because nobody knows why the ground in some areas of the Black Rock Desert gets so hot. Since the late 1970s, strange activity in the soil was reported by individuals living on the outskirts of Gerlach. Initially, it was written off as geothermal activity. After all, there are a lot of hot springs in Nevada. However, then a change occurred. Within some areas of the playa, the dry, level lake bed where the heat was confined, and Black Rock sits. Spots that are round and just a few meters broad. They had no spring connection, no steam, and no sulfur odor. Just a sudden, intense temperature increase that was powerful enough to cause plastic to distort, shoes to melt, and animals to avoid the vicinity. In 1981, surface temperatures were measured by the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, survey team. Attaining 163 derived 73 days in an area that isn't exposed to the sun. Although a thermal anomaly was detected, it was never looked into further. The official explanation, not enough danger. Locals, however, knew better. Among long-standing residents, there is an area known unofficially as Sector D inhabitants, a remote area in the foot of the Calico Mountains southwest of Gerlach. Campers stayed away from it. Hunters ceased coming in. Cattle ranchers even forbade their cows from grazing close to it. 1994 saw a geologist Frank Tini made an effort to dig close to the area as part of a geothermal mission of prospecting. He recorded 12 samples of bores. Just 6 survived. The others bent sensors, burned drill tips, and, most unsettling of all, recorded there were rhythmic, rather than seismic, earth tremors that seemed to be coming from something pulsing below. His last submission, submitted prior to this line, was part of his grant that was pulled. It's not magma, whatever's underneath. It has breath. In the course of 2007, an exhibit that was positioned too near the boundary of the designated hot zone during the Burning Man festival started to moth. The construction was reported by sculptor Lena Corwin, whose metalwork show was situated above rebar-plated ground. Despite the absence of fire, open flame, and direct sunshine, it started to warp before noon. Thermal images captured with a circular burn that appeared to be an inverted flame was visible beneath the surface of the borrowed drone. Analysis later detected no heat signature that was in line with known geothermal flows from UNR's Earth Sciences Department. The date was, it seemed, too dry, like though energy was seeping upward and then being sealed off once more. 2011 saw the release of an independent. Joel Reyes, a research student, tried to set up a passive thermal grid in 3 different places throughout the anomaly of Gerlach. The reading from the first 2 were normal. Sector D's third closest sent for precisely 6 hours. After that, it stopped working. Upon retrieving the sensor, Reyes discovered that the housing was partially only from the inside. It melted. Stranger still, the storage card has 18 a single unintelligible audio file after nindless of static data. The document's a timestamp of 4:04 a.m. was contained in the metadata, but the format was distorted. 3 different systems had memory problems as a result of attempts to decode it. I waited, and I believe I felt the long, steady footprints coming from the west, but they are gone. Nothing has been here for years. Ground tremble, but there was never an engine, only dust. Dozens more identical accounts have since emerged, always around this simultaneously, from various places throughout the town, and always just out of sight. In 2007, a group of, after installing motion-activated trail cameras throughout a number of rhyolite sites, amateur investigators departed the area. 3 cameras were stolen after a 72-hour absence. 2 were discovered in the same spot inside the rail depot that had fallen, and what they found was unsettling shadow that shifts across the screen from left to right. At 3:14 a.m., a short metallic screech was captured by all 3 devices, followed by static. 17 seconds of total quiet, with no wind or other noise when the video started up again. A single frame was shown 5 times. A still image of an ancient investigators believed it was tampering when they discovered a steam engine parked on phantom rails. However, the metadata only displayed a timestamp that read November 6th and no corruption. 1910. Strange behavioral loops are reported by overnight visitors to rhyolite. Cell phones restarting on their own initiative. Watches that halt at 3:14 a.m. Hearing footsteps in gravel while no one else is around. Hearing voices repeatedly talking the same thing. Tickets. Please be mindful that some hikers who traverse the region report wasting time by arriving at checkpoints too soon or losing hours without being aware of it. A Reno geology student reported seeing a group of people close to the depot at sunrise. They were gone when he got there. No cars, no tracks, but he discovered a ticket stub beneath a broken bench. Date: March 12, 1911. According to a fringe idea known as the rhyolite loop, there may be a temporal echo implanted in the ground as a result of nearby mineral deposits generate electromagnetic abnormalities, but it's not simply sound. In 1993, a historian allegedly entered the site through the depot archway and discovered what seemed to be a refurbished gas lighting, folded timetables, and a man at the desk in the lobby. He said, "Uniform." But as soon as he spoke, everything vanished and the air shattered like glass, leaving him burned and leaving the town. On his fingers like he had touched a live wire. No formal investigation was ever conducted into the occurrence. In 2015, an independent as part of a horror short, the filmmaker attempted to film a nighttime scene at rhyolite, and the crew claimed all 3 digital after 3:10 a.m. Cameras stopped recording, and one of them restarted by itself. The train station was completely intact in the video it took, with the shadows of people standing motionless and silent. The scene was made available online as part of a teaser by the filmmaker, but those who improved the audio claimed to have heard a faint background sound. Final boarding. If a community has the ability to rewind time, because Walker Lake is less than 100 miles away, what does the desert conceal that it does not want to be reproduced at all? Contains something much more bizarre. A Cold War jet found undamaged at the bottom of the ocean, not Echoes or Shadows Lake while its motor remained heated. They discovered the sunken plane in Walker Lake operating. Some equipment malfunction, while others continue to function long after their intended use has ended. Walker Lake, Nevada, located in the barren wastelands of Mineral County, Nevada. It's secluded, frigid, and largely forgotten. Locals say it's cursed. However, in 2005, A team of divers with military training discovered that the word wasn't appropriate because something was alive down there, and it wasn't meant to be. The 2005 dive was considered normal by the authorities. A civilian-military cooperative search for underwater Cold War artifacts following unusual readings detected by sonar in the northern area of the lake. Informally, the military sought to confirm claims that had been circulating since the late 1970s that over central Nevada, the experimental jet vanished from radar and was never seen again. Retrieved. There was only static and an explosion of inexplicable electromagnetic interference over the radio, no wreckage, and lake. The divers reached a depth of 118 feet below glacial cold water and silt. Found it, a jet aircraft from the Cold War, immaculate and uncorroded. The tail number matched an aircraft reported destroyed during training in 1971, but the body recovered intact. The cockpit glass was unbroken, the inside bone was dry, and the instrumentation was even stranger. The onboard black box was operating and the display remained lit, using a battery type that had not been utilized since the diver who recovered the black box claimed that as soon as he touched the plane, he heard something. But it wasn't until the researchers isolated the sound once it surfaced. It was pressure, like someone breathing inside the hull. The last 5 minutes prior to the alleged crash were replayed using black box data, and the pilot sounded aware, composed, and emergency-free. Cool, no mechanical issue. Then static. A female voice, not the pilot, came on the channel. There was a pause, followed by a final entry, in coordinates that didn't match anything in Nevada airspace. Walker is the gate, not the destination. The lake was promptly closed to more dives. Citing dangerous, several divers went public, claiming that the jet's navigation panel had restarted despite the lake bed's instability. Another stated that his oxygen sensor started to reverse, indicating negative pressure, as if two of the divers experienced recurring audio, which was very unsettling. Something was drawing oxygen away from him. In the weeks that followed, many reported having hallucinations and hearing a jet engine spooling up underwater. Walker Lake was visited by military troops prior to the 2005 rescue. An incident in 1982 reportedly involved sonar buoys detected mechanical movement beneath the surface, and a drone sent to look into it came back with video frames that were distorted and displayed a cockpit canopy opening beneath the water. However, the water stayed unaltered. Some people think that the plane was led down rather than brought down, as maybe something beneath the lake had been anticipating its acceptance. A Reno Fringe researcher wrote a report in 2010 revealed that Walker Lake is situated above a geomagnetic fissure, which could interact with more ancient military tech in unexpected ways. He suggested that the jet didn't crash in 1971. He responded, "Entered what exactly? A space where signal doesn't just travel, but it waits. The lake is still accessible, time can be preserved, and robots can recall their past selves even after they are no longer there." Fishing in the vicinity of the northern basin is discouraged. Diving licenses are suspended indefinitely, and since then, there have been reports of odd activity. Fishermen claim that when they cross the old test, their sonar suddenly goes dark. Region. Some say they see lights at night beneath the sea, and once every few years, someone says they hear beneath the surface, the distinct sound of a jet engine. Then, silence. Some stories aren't shared. They appear without invitation and without explanation. Nevada doesn't simply maintain secrets. It repeats them in time, space, and sand. Wasn't fiction or legend. All of these incidents were reported, documented, or captured by individuals who were present. What else might be lurking beneath the map if these 6 were real? Tap the playlist. Explore the next band state. Because in the United States, the most disturbing mysteries are happening now and aren't just stories in books.